Hi folks, welcome back to Booze with Nick, full-length edition, and I do mean a full-length edition today, because I am taking my time reviewing in depth an outstanding whiskey, Johnnie Walker Green. Folks, is it worth the hype? Bottom line up front, yes. In particular for fans of Johnnie Walker. If you enjoyed the more complex expression of Black Label, such as Double Black, then you'll like this. If you found Double Black a little too smoky, but you liked the complexity relative to plain Black Label, then you'll probably really like what they're doing with Green Label. Because while it definitely has more depth than Black Label, and it should for the price, and we'll get to that, it definitely doesn't have the significant peat and smoke that is present in Double Black that I loved, but that isn't necessarily for everyone. You know, this might even appeal, there's enough going on in this that it might even appeal to adamant single malt drinkers who complain that blends are too generic or too dull, although I honestly don't know how you can draw that conclusion about a good blend. Some adamant single malt drinkers, I think very narrow-mindedly, complain that blends lack complexity, which doesn't even begin to make sense, or that they lack character, which makes actually even less sense, and we'll get to that as well. I've talked about the Diageo advantage before, and it is absolutely relevant to this whiskey as well. This is a blend of 4 named whiskeys, and probably quite a few more than those 4 named ones. The 4 named ones are Talisker, Kalila, which you've heard me, speak favorably about before on the channel here, and 2 lesser-known Speysides, Cragganmore and Linkwood. I had never heard of them until doing the research for this episode. I had never heard of them until I saw their names printed on the side of the presentation box that the whiskey came in. They are Speysides, and they, of course, are there to balance the maritimes that are in here. And they do that absolutely beautifully. I'm going to jump in to the nosing here. So I have, it's fantastic, I have my copy of World of Whiskey here with me by the inimitable McLean, and he describes this as complex, rich, and powerful, which is true. Identifies pepper and oak, fruit aromas, a malty sweetness, and some smoke. All true, not super helpful, because there's a lot more going on than that. On the nose is so gentle, but also so full. Gentle does not mean weak or thin, it is lush, okay? It is just redolent with beautiful smells. I'm getting apple pie, so a sweeter, stewed or baked apple fruit, but also a hint of some kind of baking spice. So as an American, I'm just gonna say apple pie, can't help myself. Something that could be toffee or butterscotch. It kind of goes back and forth for me. And some very mild maritime notes. There is an almost impossibly mild brininess on the nose. It's barely there, but it is there, and it's awesome. I don't really get any significant peat smell in the nose. Some tasters do. While preparing for this episode, I did see some reviewers who were getting peat. Hey, to each their own. On the palate, more apple, somewhat less baked and stewy, but still fairly rich apple. Some vanilla, some honey, light, mild peatiness, nothing overwhelming. Even people who aren't into peat shouldn't be overwhelmed by this. About on par, maybe with what you would get in Black Label, plain Black Label, single black. Slight bit of brine, very, very slight, probably coming from the Talisker if I had to guess, and some oak, but it's not a charred oak, it's not a bourbon oak, it's kind of a vegetal, bright, young oak. Fantastic. The finish is long, fairly mild, some peat on the finish, as well as some lingering sweetness. It's just superb. It's an excellent whiskey, and we would expect it to. So no mystery where the maritime notes come from. They come from two whiskeys that stand alone as greats by themselves, of course, the Talisker and the Kalila. And those fruitier notes are coming from those two Speysides, as well as whatever other unnamed ones put in there, but we can identify a couple of them. So looking at Cragganmore, again, I couldn't get a hold of any certainly to try, so I'm having to rely on secondhand information from McLean, but it's a reliable source. He describes the Cragganmore as floral with heathery aromas. He says that it smells typically Speyside, but there's a robust woody complexity with a trace of smoke on the palate, which is actually kind of unusual for Speysides, but floral heathery aromas. Possibly. Not sure that's really coming through. Looking at the Linkwood, this is him discussing the Linkwood Flora and Fauna 12-year-old. The standard expression is on the lighter side of the Speyside style, with a fresh, grassy, green apple fragrance and faint notes of spice. So, that perhaps can be identified coming through here with the apple notes, although they're coming through less light and more full and more rich here. Now that you mention it, perhaps there is just a hint of the floral on the palate, which is interesting because usually you pick up floral notes on the nose, but I wasn't, but potentially on the palate there was some. Always jigger, folks. As with, as with a lot of blends, this really comes alive on ice. I've used a very small cube so as not to overpower or dilute or compromise the whiskey. Just bring out some different notes than we get when we do strictly neat. The sweetness is a little bit deeper, and so is the peat. Well, folks, I could probably talk all night about this whiskey, but I won't. We're at 8.5 minutes, and I think that's just enough. If you've made it to the end, sincerely appreciate it. Thank you very much for your time and your attention. I hope you're excited about going out and trying this whiskey. Again, if you like Scotch, you really should like this, as it blends what could arguably be called the best of both sides of the Scotch world. As always, live well, drink well, and be well, and stay tuned for a lot more Scotch reviews coming up this fall, including in the near future, I don't know, the next level up in the Johnnie Walker stable.